Welcome back to another edition of Recruiter Fuel. You know, usually these Recruiter Fuels are a little more lighthearted, a little bit more fun involved, and we might get there, but it's a topic that is not as light as some of the other ones. And in fact, Dana and Nancy, thank you for joining me. You were the only two brave enough to sit down and have this conversation with me. And it just so happens you're both female, and it has to do with female. There's a topic that's been talked about a lot here recently, and it's a law that was passed in California, and they're calling it California Senate Bill 826. And basically it mandates that any publicly held company domiciled in California, there's still some discussion on what domiciled in California means, they're mandating by the end of 2019 a certain number of women on the board of every publicly held company. So there's been a lot of discussion back and forth. Is that the right thing to do? Is it not the right thing to do? But I think here's two ladies. You're just entering the workforce. Nancy, you're actually getting ready to retire from the workforce, and you've been an executive for a number of years now. Two very different perspectives. What do you think about the law in general?
I don't think it actually addresses the problem, because I feel like if you're saying there has to be a certain amount of women who are making these like big executive decisions, you're not actually fixing the problem. If companies are like, you know, I can just see it now, like companies are like, who do we put on there, blah, blah, blah. But if you're scrambling to find people, or you're just trying to put, you know, if you're just trying to put a certain amount of, you know, female talent onto a board, you're not actually fixing the problem. You shouldn't be scrambling to find female leadership and talent in a business anyways.
Nancy, what do you think about this? And Dana's got a fair point, but the opposite side would say, well, if you don't put a law on it, it's not going to happen.
I don't think there's any doubt that women bring a different perspective and a different insight to a group.
Well, I would agree.
Be it on a board of directors, whatever it is. But at the same time, I would agree with you. I don't think this is the right way to go about that. I think that mandating a law like this and making it subject to financial penalties.
Oh yeah, significant financial penalties potentially. And the larger your board, the greater the percentage of females you have to have on your board through 2019 or by the end of 2019.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to just see it, and I realize there's been a challenge with that, but I'd certainly like to just see that happen naturally. I don't think there's any doubt that there's a lack of women on corporate boards. We know that.
We know the numbers there. Yeah.
We know that's true.
Yeah.
We also studies have shown
women make up 20% of board seats on the S&P 500 right now.
Yikes. And that's and is that enough? No, it's not. I'd like to think that women have a lot to contribute in that way, but I don't think this is the way to go about it. I think they need to go through the same muster that the men do, and that they need to be brought to the board in the same way.
So you both brought up something where and we talked a little bit about it beforehand, and there's no collusion here, by the way, in terms of discussing this topic, right? But you both brought up it's not addressing the problem.
Exactly.
So Dana, from your perspective, as somebody who you're just getting ready to go to college, right? So you're still in high school.
Yes.
Yeah, you're a senior.
Yes, I'll be graduating in May.
So it's great to hear from your perspective. How do you think you address, or how do these organizations address the actual problem?
I think it's something interesting. A lot of my friends and a lot of things that I've seen online with the people that I interact with is that it's not the women now, they're demanding that to have the same say, to have the same...
But shouldn't they?
They should. They totally should. And what's happening now is that there's a big shift in how women are going to be able to get onto these, you know, big... again, like executive director type positions. It's not because, you know, it should be mandatory to have women. It should be that, you know, we have the same intellectual capability as men, and there shouldn't be an issue anyways for us to get on. And so I feel like this kind of culture shift and what women are demanding and what women really want and are being very vocal about, I think that's going to be the thing that actually gets women into these positions. Is these laws don't actually address the issue.
Do they help? Can a law like this actually hurt women potentially? I have no dog in this fight, so to speak, right? I'm curious.
Well, I think certainly that you always run the risk of in an effort to become compliant with the law, you run the risk of getting women on the board who are not qualified.
And is
Yeah,
that fair to the woman who's on the board?
No, it's not fair to the
No.
women on the board, and it's not fair to the shareholders of the company. You know, they're under the gun to get women in place on the board so that they don't have these financial penalties. But at the same time, that doesn't bode well for the board in general. You're looking at, you know, bylaws have to be changed, and this isn't something that's going to happen immediately. There are companies that are bound by strict bylaws in terms of how their board membership and the numbers of directors they can have.
So what would you recommend from either one of you to companies that are, well, it's an industry thing. It's not even one specific industry. It's really kind of where we are as a country, right? What would you recommend so that we're addressing the problem and not just the symptom? Because it seems like we're trying to address the symptom. So I agree with you. I think organizations in general should have more diversity and female representation, not only in at the board level, but in leadership. I'm with you 100% on that.
Agreed.
But if this is addressing the symptom and not the problem, how do you begin to change the conversation to address the problem? And this is a big deal. We're not going to solve this problem sitting here and having this conversation, but I think it's great to hear from the both of you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I feel like the problem is that women obviously don't have the representation. They don't have what's the word? I'm trying to think. Like, they don't have the spot, I guess, or they don't take up the amount of space on, you know.
But how do you get them to do that? How do you get companies to actually start looking at females as equal? Or is it that they're not looking at, is that the actual problem?
No, that's what I was getting to, is like, without this problem, it's not going to be something, again, that is solved overnight. It has to be changed by a culture shift in general. Again, we're treating the symptoms in this case and not the actual issue.
So from a more practical perspective, and I'll ask both of you this, Dana and Nancy, what would be one or two pieces of advice you'd give to an organization based on where you are entering the workforce to address the problem and not the solution? What's one or two things a company should be doing?
Well, what this law, at least from my perspective, what it does is that it politicizes women's roles in these big, you know, leadership and decision-making positions by saying that, oh, you need to have a certain amount of women, you know, on your executive board. It doesn't do anything for us. It just politicizes the whole thing.
But the flip side of that, there would be certain females that would say, and not even just females, males and females that would say that's the only way to force it. It's the only way to kind of jumpstart the problem. You don't think so?
I really don't think that it's the only way to get change to happen in these situations. Like Nancy said, it's again more of a bottom-up thing. You have to change the culture of your business to say, look, women and men might be different biologically, but as for what happens in their brains, what we can think about, what we can handle, how we reason, and what we're able to actually do, that's no different. Women have the same intellectual capacity as men.
Well, in fact, one of the studies that I was looking at earlier said that companies that were more gender diverse had 15% more likely to outperform their peers or outperform their peers. Now, there wasn't a direct cause and effect correlation. They hadn't gotten that far, but it either shows companies that are more successful have more females, or for companies to become more successful, they have more females. It doesn't matter which way, it still shows that greater diversity of thought and so forth is different. But Nancy, from your perspective, I mean, a piece of practical advice that we could really start to kind of change the conversation about what's going on in companies.
I think we have to look beyond gender. We have to look at qualifications. We have to, and it starts way before board formation. It
Sure.
starts way before trying to solicit people to join a board or be voted onto a board. It starts before that. We have to look at creating opportunities for women, making them aware of the opportunities that are out there. I think that's one of the biggest things. And I agree with you. I see all kinds of issues with this law simply because I don't think it validates a woman's place on the board. You know, it's very easy for people to say, well, she got there because they had to put somebody on the board and she was it. I can see where that would happen.
I don't want to hear that in the future. I don't want to hear people talking like, oh, the only reason why so-and-so is here is even though she's not totally qualified is because it's a requirement. That's something I don't want to see.
No, and I think there are certainly plenty of women out there that would step up to the challenge and meet the challenge admirably.
And might be able to do a lot better and probably could than some men. I mean, let's face it.
And I do agree. I think the more viewpoints you have,
Yeah.
there's no question, the more diversity of thought, it does nothing but breed a better culture for everyone. And I can see where, statistics do support the fact that profitability in
Is
those
affected by it.
companies is
Yeah,
affected
there's no question. I
positively.
mean, this is a topic that's going to continue. I think more states are talking about similar laws. It's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. I mean, I agree with the two of you. We got to address the problem. Does a law like this address the problem? I don't know. From your perspective, it sounds like it complicates things as opposed to addressing the problem. But it seems to me that the intent is potentially the right intent.
I agree.
Yeah.
The outcome is maybe just not the right way to
I think
approach
it's the
it.
method.
The
method
method?
is wrong.
Yeah.
Like the intent is there, but a lot of the reason why there aren't a lot of women in these leadership positions is not because men are purposely going, we can't have women on this board. It's totally unconscious. It's something that people often aren't completely aware of.
Now, in
So,
fairness, I think there's some people
they're totally
that
are.
way.
that think
and
the way
that's
you just
terrible.
described that they don't.
I
I
do
mean,
too.
I don't, but let's be fair, right?
No, seriously. I mean, definitely, there
Yeah.
are people that think like that, but I feel like for the most part, this issue or this law, it doesn't solve the problem. The intent is there, but it doesn't bring about the solution
Yeah.
that would actually help women in a lot of ways that we want.
One of the things I said to some of the team that didn't want to come on was like, this is a topic that it's a fine line, right? We don't want a bunch of people that are watching us getting all ticked off at us and saying, whatever the case is. But we don't have to make this a political conversation. We can actually talk as adults about it and say, okay, let's figure out ways to fix it. I'm a big proponent of that, which is why I pushed forward with even this basic conversation on the subject and to get it out there on the web so more people can comment about it. And look, I hope we don't get any haters for the sake of being haters. What I'm really hoping for is that we continue to create a dialogue.
Yeah.
That otherwise, how are we going to get to the solutions for your generation, right?
That's the
You're
most
just coming
important
in.
thing. Yeah, that's the most important thing is that we're actually able to talk about these things because if we don't actually address this problem, nothing is going to get solved.
Yeah.
If we don't ever address the fact that women don't have the representation on these boards that they should, then nothing is going to happen anyways.
Yeah. Well, I use you as an example, and I'm going to say this anyways. I mean, you started many years ago here.
I did.
So we've worked together for how many years now?
14.
14 years. You started as my assistant, and you held that role for probably 3 months, 6 months, or something like that. And you've been basically running the shop for 13 of those 14 years, right? I mean, there was no glass ceiling here for you.
Not at all. Not at all.
So it can be done.
It can be done. I totally agree with that.
And
I was given a lot of opportunity, and I embraced it.
And now you're leading up to retirement in the
Now
next
I'm leading
30
up to
days or so.
retirement.
So we'll be sorry to see you go. So we're going to have to find more people, Dana, after Nancy retires to have this conversation because I think it's something that we got to continue to talk about.
Agreed.
Definitely.
Agreed.
Thank you for your time. Thank you for
Thank you.
taking.
Thanks.
Thank you for being honest about this, guys. Look, I hope everybody, guys and gals that are watching this, the intent of this is not to spark an ignition that's going to create a fire. The idea was to spark conversation because we got to get to the bottom of this. Otherwise, we're addressing symptoms and not addressing the problems. Come back, comment, make sure you check us out next week.